Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 10 Chapters Apart podcast. I am your host, Steven, joined by my co host, Jason. And again, we bring to you a wonderful, special, delightful, scrumptious guest, our good friend, Nobuki. How's it going, Nobuki?
It's pretty good. Pretty hot over here. I'm in Phoenix right now, so it's 110 degrees today. So we're feeling it today.
Oh, that is crazy. Do you want to give a little, brief introduction of yourself for the viewers who might not know who you are?
Sure. My name is Nobuki Yaso. I'm studying business at the University of Oregon. And grew up in the church my entire life. My dad became a pastor when I was 5 years old. So been growing up in the church ever since. And then recently, and the reason why I'm in Phoenix is my dad decided to plant a new church. And so we moved from Portland, Oregon, all the way to Phoenix over here. And we've been over here at the church in Phoenix for about 8 months.
Cool. And there was something that you kind of you had an idea of talking about this week. And Jason, I think you want to kick us off with the discussion that we're going to have?
Yeah, sure. So we've been actually sitting on this topic for a while, thinking about comfort and discomfort and the roles that they play in Christian life. And we were waiting for just the perfect scrumptious guest to discuss it with us. And Nobuki said that was something that he sort of was thinking about a lot, some trials that he walked through sort of like during the school year and stuff. So I guess we'll just be exploring that today. But to kick it off, sort of a primer for you guys, I'd like to know sort of what discomfort you've faced in your walk with God, that, like the real kind of nitty gritty Christian discomfort. Or if you haven't, that's, just sort of what does that look like in your guys' walk with God?
Yeah, I think for me, last spring was just like one of the most difficult seasons of my life. And I think growing up in the church, I'm like, I'm told like God is like joy, it's like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. And so I think growing up, I've always thought I was supposed to have joy. And yet last spring, when I just hit a really tough season, I was like, I didn't experience joy. And I was wondering if there was something wrong with me. And in that, I felt like really uncomfortable with my faith as I kind of slowly just started to drift away from the Lord, from my community. I kind of started to isolate myself. And so I think in that, I think I felt a lot of discomfort back then.
I think for me, when I think of discomfort in my life, I think of any time I've had to share the gospel with anyone. That's about as most discomfort as I can think of. Or I'm the type of person to get into pretty political conversations, like religious conversations with other people. And so that's a lot of where the discomfort comes from, just being not knowing how to have courage and to talk about my faith in a way that will get other people to understand how I'm coming from, but also not be judgmental on them. I think that is, and also there are some people that are pretty abrasive towards Christianity. And so it's hard to stand up for my faith in when facing those kinds of people. But as far as physical discomfort, I mean, honestly, being in the United States, we don't face a lot of physical persecution for being Christians. People are not coming to burn our houses down and things like that. So I wouldn't say I would have faced too much of discomfort in that sense. But yeah. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, for sure the same way. No active physical persecution ever, just because of where we live. When I think of discomfort in my own walk with God, I think of relationships. And I guess just the way that we have to treat people, or we get treated by people, it looks a lot different when we put God at the center. And so I feel like sometimes God will give people to you or take people away from you. And that's just how he works, and you have to work with it. Even if you that relationship or want things to go well, sometimes they just don't. So I've definitely experienced, sorry, I know I'm being cryptic, but I've definitely experienced hardships in my relationships when I felt like it was very much a God thing, and not necessarily a way in which I might have, screwed up, or, maybe it was me. But I'm glad that you bring up sort of the difference between America and other countries, because today, actually, in church, our pastor talked about going on a mission to a country in Asia where they were supposed to meet a man, and he actually was late to his meeting because there was like a riot. People were, basically just rioting in a Christian neighborhood where he was staying, and he almost had his life taken. And so to hear that kind of contrast is very eye-opening for us in America because we've never had to deal with that kind of thing. But like when you guys hear about that and compare it to your own discomfort, like I guess what does that do for you? How does that like change your perspective or make you think differently about your own discomfort?
It definitely for me, like um, it makes me feel like I don't experience that much, or it kind of makes it feel like the struggles that I've gone through are not as significant uh, in respect to the struggles that other Christians in countries might face. So I guess a part of me kind of feels like, oh, why haven't I faced that kind of discomfort? Like, would my faith sort of be stronger if I had gone through something like that, or is my faith like I guess lacking right now because I would say right now I live a pretty comfortable life being in the college ministry, being part of like Epic at OSU. It's just been like it's there are times where it is hard and there's a lot of work that goes into it, but I wouldn't say I faced like that kind of discomfort, the kind of danger that comes from being Christian elsewhere. And so sometimes it makes me question like um, how strong my faith really is when I haven't had to face things like that.
Yeah, I think about me. I'm like really associated with a lot of Japanese Christians, being half Japanese myself, and so I think even hearing their stories about how when they go home and kind of even like actually the persecution that they face, like from their family, a lot of people get disowned from their family, and even because Japan has such a low like Christian population, like the struggle of finding a community back home or finding a church back home. And then I think about like me over here. It's like I grew up in a Christian family. Like when I come home, like I have like a wonderful like loving family that like supports my spiritual growth like so much. And even like I'm involved in Epic at U of O. And so like being able to be surrounded in this Christian bubble, I think sometimes for me, I like wonder like, do I get too comfortable with my faith? Like even at U of O, I can definitely say like a majority of my friends are Christian. And so I think in that, I think I'm almost like in a way like force myself and like try things harder. Like, okay, I need to get into my word more because I'm not experiencing all this persecution, or maybe I'm not feeling like I'm being pushed because of like lack of discomfort. And so I feel like often, I think often like kind of guilty at like almost like how at ease my life has been, like growing up in a PK household and then growing up in a fantastic church. And so I think in a way, like I try to almost make up for the lack of discomfort by like forcing actually discomfort into my own life.
Hmm. Yeah, I personally like as eye-opening as those stories are, I often find for me it's really hard to sort of apply that emotional response to my own walk with God because it just completely seems like different worlds to me. It's hard to when my frame of reference is like the Western church, no persecution. Nobuki, you've been to Japan several times, I think. I've never been to a nation where Christians are persecuted. So it's so hard for me to sort of like get into that mindset where uh, I understand what they are going through and I can apply that to my life because this is all I know. So, and I suspect that that is actually true of a lot of our listeners that we hear these stories. The man who almost had his life taken by the mob, or Christians in other nations who have family members killed or they're captured or all that. How for those people who don't have like a direct understanding or experience with that, how would you say that we should be able to apply that knowledge of persecution in other nations?
It seems like it's hard to answer because it's hard to be put in that kind of position. I think one of the things is that um, like Christians in America really deal with our own specific set of challenges that are not like the challenges that are faced by Christians in countries where they're persecuted. I think even though we don't face like physical persecution here, we definitely do face like challenges, just like culturally, especially in all three of us like are from Portland, Oregon, which tends to be a much more like liberal city in the Pacific Northwest, and so facing that kind of like um, just the ideologies of people and like the kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but almost feels like there's a pressure on Christians to like think a certain way or not to think a certain way. And I think if um, we just kind of ignore that and we say, "Oh, I'm gonna live my like my own Christian life in my bubble and like kind of forget about the world that's around me," I think that's not a very Christian way to have an outlook on the life, because Christians are supposed to be outreaching to other people, right? And to not like necessarily change the world through like politics or things like that, but change the world through like winning people's hearts and showing people like who God is and who Christ is. And so I think the comfort and discomfort that comes to like American Christians that maybe have not faced that comes from like stepping outside of maybe the Christian bubble that you're in and really trying to reach out. Because when we think about doing missions, we often think about like, oh, going overseas, going to another country that is like not as developed as the US and spreading the gospel there. But like there's plenty of ways to do outreach here, like within your local community, within your city, with even your neighbors, really. And I think that can be a little bit it can be discomforting. It can be hard to just reach out to the people who are so close with you, but that might be a step in the discomfort that American Christians have to take.
I love that you mentioned that too. Like, I think, especially like my freshman year, I was like faced with the decision whether to go to a mission in the States or a mission abroad. And I was like, mission abroad, like that's the way harder, right? Like I already live in the States, like that's so easy. And yet I think we forget like the impact that we have about like blooming where we are planted and being like there. I really think that like wherever we go, there's an opportunity to share the gospel. And I also love like we were talking about like discomfort and comfort comparing to churches outside the United States and the Western church, because I think those are both actually battles, but different ones. I think the Western church has to battle like the comfort, and I think it's so easy here being comfortable. And just like other churches have to deal with like discomfort. I think both of those are very like valid battles that we have, and yet two very different ones. And so therefore, I think we have to also approach it differently, you know?
Yeah. Go ahead, Steven.
But yeah, I see like I don't know. It just feels like American Christianity or Christians here in America. Like, I see a lot of comfortable Christians here, and I'm not trying to be like judgmental on like those people, because there are often times where like I just feel, oh, I just want to do my own thing. Like, kind of, I'm not putting in the effort that I feel like I ought to put in as well. But also just like, I don't know, is it a trend just within Western Christianity in America, where I'm feeling like it's just like a once a week, or not even like a once a week thing. It's just like a, hey, yeah, I identify as Christian, I identify as like a young adult college student, it doesn't become like part of really like wraps your world around, and it sort of just is like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, all right, and then that's like I'll go on and do whatever else with my life. Is that something that is maybe we're seeing more in Western Christianity, in American Christianity, and is that like a problem that we need to try to like push against?
I mean, we're only 21 or 22 years old each, right? So, I mean, I can't say with certainty, but I would suspect that sort of comfort. Another word that we sometimes throw around is lukewarm. I suspect that that's been a thing for a long time, and actually, even the Book of Revelation, 7 letters to the 7 churches. He says, like Jesus's words written by John is like, "You're lukewarm, so I'll spit you out of my mouth." So, I mean, all the way back 2,000 years, right? This has been happening. So, if I could guess, I would say it's not a new trend, but I think it is interesting how the way that our culture has developed politically in terms of social justice, and the way that our culture advocates for sort of finding your own beliefs, adopting like what you personally believe to be true. I think that has paved an interesting way for Christians to identify as Christian, but then still take other beliefs to be true that, that maybe feel better for them. Like one big one that comes to mind is homosexuality. It's like the Bible, I would say, is pretty clear that homosexuality is a sin. And I wish the Bible didn't say that, because I know people who are homosexual and I wish that they could be happy. But that's, our culture would say, like, love is love. You can choose what you want to believe. But, and we've talked about this before, is that like I rest on the Bible as my source of truth. And even if I don't like what it says, I feel obliged to take it as true. So, while the comfort and discomfort aspect of that may not be the same, I think our culture has allowed us to become more comfortable in choosing our own beliefs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like so much of our culture is kind of become like a Build-A-Bear workshop. It's like, I like this part of the gospel. I like this part of the New Testament. I'm an Old Testament and God of like wrath. Like, no thanks on that. God is a God of love. And I think that's really hard. It's funny because I was talking to a few people just right before this conversation. It's like, when we should let the Bible shape our beliefs, right? Not let our beliefs shape like our view and perspective of the Bible. And I think like that's such a big part of like why I think there's also big like comfort in like Western Christianity, is because they take and choose what they believe, right? And I think like if there's something hard, they're like, let's not emphasize it. Like, let's not emphasize hell in church. Let's emphasize like prosperity gospel. Like, yes, Lord Jesus, like bless me. Like if I follow you, like yes. And so I think that is something that, like I said, is like very much like a battle in the Western Christianity that we have to fight back against.
But it's very interesting actually, because when I experienced like I grew up in a Chinese immigrant church basically, and the things I experienced, it's very interesting, like the way they see the Bible. There are lots of points that they emphasize that are different from, I would say, how I've experienced Christianity, like coming to college and going to a multicultural church, more American church. The things that are emphasized are a bit different, and I wonder, like we say that, oh, because American church is easier to like pick and choose like what you want from the Bible, but with so many different church like denominations, and it seems like there are lots of churches that like emphasize one thing, emphasize another thing, and teachings that lean more like liberal, more conservative. I was talking to a friend like a couple of days ago who was just telling me that like, they were thinking about trying to find like different churches around them, because they wanted to find a church that like fits more with like the things that they believe. And I was like, that's interesting, because why is it that churches seem to have like also you can pick in church the kind of theology, like you can pick like a more liberal leaning theology, you can pick a more conservative theology. Is there really like something that like a foundation, a firm like center that we have to stand on as far as like the Bible, and try to find that truth as much as possible? Or is it like this kind of, maybe Christianity is expressed itself in different ways, and maybe this problem of like pick and choose is not really as bad as we make it out to be?
I think a lot of that comes down to interpretation, right? I'm very sure that there's a good amount of pick and choose. I mean, like, even in Reformation times, the pick and choose was like, your works are the thing that saves you, and then we look at the whole picture and we say, okay, we're saved by grace, but faith without works is dead. Okay, this is a more complete picture. Now we have the Protestant church, and so I think we definitely see clear examples of that. But when we look at different denominations, I feel like a lot of that comes down to interpretation, and that there are going to be a lot of theological points that different churches stand on that we might not believe in. So in a sense, it's the way that you frame it. It does sound very silly to say, oh, I'm going to find a church that supports my beliefs more, but I do feel like there is a certain amount of validity to that, and that not just because the two churches are different, I wouldn't necessarily say that one of them has to be wrong, or both are wrong. And the reality is, like, we're all searching for the truth, and everyone's I feel like there is one objective truth, and I don't think any of us have it like completely right. So um, yeah, I don't know that it's completely pick and choose, but I do see what you're saying definitely. And it's interesting that that is, you know, something that we hear and something that we see in church life in America.
I
Something
think
that,
like even like it,
oh, go for it, Nabuki.
I just think like, you know, it's like so funny to think like there's been so many theological debates about so many small different topics. Like you have Calvinism versus Arminianism, you know, like you have all these like little arguments about stuff. And yet I think like as long as we have like the core foundation of like Jesus died and rose again, then like at the basis of all that, it's like I think um not to say it doesn't matter, but I definitely think it's like they're more like minor details that it's like, you know, if you believe that like, you know, what do we say? What is the tulip? Well, anyway, one of the two things, right? If you're a Calvinist or Arminius on like one of the sides, like it doesn't matter. Like, you know, we still believe in the same God, like the amazing work that he does.
But I think the funny thing about that is that like tying it to comfort and discomfort, like should we be more uncomfortable with the fact that these things aren't matching up among the denominations? You know, are we supposed to be searching for that truth? Like when we pour into the Bible and read and like learn about God and what He's trying to say to us, is it okay to be comfortable in just like saying, oh, okay, this denomination seems more like, oh, what I've experienced, what I've lived through life, you know, it fits my worldview better? Or should we be trying to like take our worldview and really like put it into the shape of how God would want us to live? Do you think that's a goal that we should be having, or is this like a completely separate issue?
Yeah, that's an interesting question when you phrase it like that. Um, I I think I still believe that it's okay in terms of comfort and discomfort. Uh, I think it's okay personally. Personally, I think it's okay to be comfortable with that idea because uh, from what I've experienced, so Stephen, we're both in Epic at OSU. Pretty much all of Epic goes to one church, Grant Avenue Baptist Church. We didn't really choose it, and so, but in that way, I think we have been able to have an impact on that church, at least within the college group. Unfortunately, there's not like a ton of overlap between all the college students who go there and the Corvallis residents. I honestly wish there was more. But I think the fact that it's about the community first and we try to rest on the Bible. Like in all my time there, I don't know that I've ever heard like, this is what Grant Avenue Baptist Church believes. I do feel like there's more of an emphasis on like, if we can rest on scripture and find this in the Bible, then you know, that is something that we can hold to be true. And in that way, I think maybe it should be of concern if we look at a church and that is not like directly something like if they don't preach from the Bible. That's pretty like obviously like red flag. But I want to believe that a lot of churches are just trying to look at the Bible for truth and to sort of build off that. And I think the way that that manifests itself can be different. But I personally, to answer your question directly, I guess I feel comfortable with that. And if there is discomfort, it comes from a church that is not founded on the Bible, or at least, yeah, trying to derive all of their truth from the Bible.
I think like when I think about that question, because as I'm involved with like U of O Epic here as well, like I think also there's a portion of like that discomfort is good. That you have all these people different perspectives, and that as we like come and we discuss things, I think like I feel like I like my values and like what I believe is like refined. As like we discuss things, and I'm like, like I never thought about it from like this perspective before, or like, maybe I never thought about like that. And like as I go back to the Bible again and see like what it has to say. And so I feel like for me, like coming, because like college is such an awesome time to see and meet like people from so many different backgrounds. Like even if like you're all Christian, like I think you all come from different family backgrounds, different churches that taught like different things. And so when you come together, I think that like just the ability to be able to refine each other, I think is really cool. And so for me, I think I really love like kind of like going more to be comfortable because it forces me to not just take like what I believe. Because I think as someone who's grown up in the church, especially as someone who grew up as a PK, like it's so easy to take what my dad said and just listen to church and like, okay, since he said it, it must be true. I think I felt that about my faith a lot. It's like, oh, because he said in the truth, like because my dad studied the word, like he like prepped his message for like a week or two in advance. Like he has to like know what he's saying. And yeah, I think in college it was a good time for me as I came with people with all sorts of different beliefs, like to be able to take a step back and say, like, wait, like what do I believe? Not what do my parents believe, not what my church tells me to believe, but rather like what do I believe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't have those people like Paul, to just tell us like this is the right wrong. If you see something wrong, write a letter to the church and be like, no, sorry, you should be doing it like this way. And so it's hard. We have to kind of base what the Bible says and try to use it to influence how we're thinking in the modern times and like the challenges that we face with now. So, and then also like anytime this is kind of I get on this like debate topic, I end up thinking like, you're right. It doesn't like matter too much, honestly. Like, yeah, it's like a lot of the details. I feel like, and you said this before, Jason. Like, if you're seriously like pursuing God and like trying to find His will for your life, then like I think you'll land on the answer that you need. Actually, I don't know if that's right theologically, but like I think like if you're pursuing God and trying to find the truth and you feel the conviction, one way or the other, and it matches up, with Scripture, then I think that you should be able to live that out and not feel like doubtful or fear about like what's right and wrong, because I think most of it doesn't matter.
I know. I'm always so scared to say that like it doesn't matter because you need the right context. But
right.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So sort of reeling it back into like personally in our walks with Jesus, how would you say? This is a really broad question, but like, what would you say are the roles of comfort and discomfort? Because I feel like we've sort of been talking about comfort like it's like a bad thing or like it hinders you in your walk with God, but comfort is not always a bad thing, right? So where is like the interplay between those two things?
I think for me, like comfort has actually, like I think about like kind of like when you think about hills and valleys, right? And so like I think like when I'm coming out of like that hill, coming out like say a rough season, I'm starting to head into that season of comfort. I think for me, like that is actually a great time of like rest. I've come back from like a hard battle, and yet there I can like find rest in the Lord, and like life is good. Like it kind of feels like my Christian walk is just like speeding by, and it feels really good to like just be able to feel free. And like during the time like when I have comfort, I feel like at the beginning of it, like I have like so much of a desire to seek after the Lord. Like there isn't really like this pressure, this issue that I'm seeking after. So I feel like I have so much more energy and time and even like mental space to be able to like pursue after the Lord. So I'm like I love like actually like that comfortable part, because I think it's almost God giving us the space to just be able to come to Him and to just rest. But in that, I think for me, it's like this, my walk, like for some reason just becomes this constant cycle of like comfort. And then I get too comfortable, where then I start forgetting to do my devos, or then I start like, I start doing it just because I feel like I have to. I'm really blessed that I grew up in a family that really instilled the habit of doing devotions every day. I'm really thankful for that. But I think when I start coming to that part where I'm too comfortable, I just do it just because it's out of habit. It's just because it's the first thing I do. I wake up, grab my bowl of cereal, grab my Bible, and just do that. And I think it can really become something that just becomes habitual, and there's like no heart in it. And so I think just like with anything, like I think comfort actually is not bad, but too much comfort is a bad thing. And I think same with discomfort as well. I think discomfort is a time for me where I realize I can't do things on my own strength. It really requires me it forces me to come to the Lord and say like, God, like I need you, I can't do this. And yeah, I think like in times of maybe like extreme discomfort, I actually I'm like, okay, God, like it's starting to go downhill like too fast. Like I'm going to start to try to take like things into my own hands. And so I think in that, like in both sides of like the comfort and the discomfort, like God is there and like He's teaching me a lesson. So I think both are really important to me.
Like when we talk about comfort and discomfort, there are different aspects of it, and they apply to different things. So when I think of, there's definitely a comfort that I think should come with a Christian who is founded in what they believe and they found it in their relationship with God, and the things that they do, the way that they love God, the way that they pray with God and want to praise God and serve God, that should come with like a level of comfort, a level of just
peace.
Yeah, just peace, like being so in tune with God, so in love with God that is like that's what brings you joy. And you feel maybe discomfort when other people like attack you for that, when people try to bring down your faith, and you have that like kind of external discomfort, but like on the inside you're resting in that comfort and that peace of like just being so in love with God. But then there's also the discomfort that is good, that comes from inside, that tells you, oh, maybe this is something that's wrong in my life right now. This is like, oh, a direction that I'm walking in that is not like aligned with God. And I feel like that kind of discomfort is good. It points you away from walking down the wrong path. It kind of gives you like a warning signal, just to tell you like, hey, you think that things are okay right now, things are not okay. You need to like watch out what's going on. And so I think both like comfort and discomfort have those like different parts of them, which are good and bad. And it's bad to become too comfortable and not have like that comfort when it becomes like, oh, you feel satisfied enough with your relationship with God and you feel comfortable in that way, then I feel like that's also bad comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Nabuki is talking about this sort of like hills and valleys thing, what that makes me think of is like when he's coming out of a battle and he's going up that hill, I feel like that's God giving him comfort, and that's awesome. And that's also sort of what you're alluding to, Stephen, is when we have this really strong relationship with God, I feel like that's God giving comfort. And then we sort of have the comfort that I give myself, like when I'm lazy to read my Bible, or like when I am not praying enough. And that's, I think, the comfort that's bad. So it's like from God, good; from me, bad. I think the discomfort is a lot more intricate, though. Like, because so again, today in church we were talking about First Peter chapter 4, and one of the things that Peter writes is that we should expect suffering, like we should expect trials. So like if there is no discomfort in our life, is that like automatically a bad thing? Should we, if we don't have any, should we be trying to like chase it or wonder like in what ways we should be uncomfortable? Or is that the sort of thing where we should wait for God to place something in our life, or like an itch in your heart to start moving in one way or another?
I just thought of something, and it sort of relates to your question, sort of not, but like when we're thinking about discomfort outside of US, it often comes with physical discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about discomfort in the US, I think of mental challenges.
Yeah.
I think I've seen like the rise of people who are struggling with mental health in these like well-developed areas where we really don't face that much physical discomfort. And I feel like that's a kind of discomfort that we are fighting right now in our area, trying to take on this challenge of like, oh, how do we encourage someone, how do we help them with their mental health? Because that's like a very different problem from like, oh, just from trying to avoid like people attacking you physically. And so that might be a discomfort that we face in more Western Christianity, that we have to take a better part in tackling versus Christianity in like Eastern nations.
Yeah, totally. I think like especially in quarantine, I think this is like even caused like even more of this like conversation to come forth. Like I know even for me, like there's a phase where it was really tough just staying inside all the time. I didn't even have any roommates, and so I think it was like really difficult for me to just be like by myself. Even with that, like the stress of like for at least for like me, like I'm still like I was doing online school at that time, and so like the stress of that, and also trying to do things like in community and still wanting to be plugged into community. I definitely think like just you're saying it's like it's not that the Western church doesn't experience discomfort, but I definitely think like as you're saying, whether it's through depression or anxiety or stress or even suicide ideation, like I think the devil definitely uses like those avenues to want to come and like attack the church. But I think like like a question for you guys is like just thinking about like the Western church, like what are the biggest traps of like comfort that we can like fall into?
I feel like just riding the wave, right? I think sort of like letting yourself get carried along. I think that's really easy, especially for all of us in OSU and UO Epic. I think it's really easy to get carried along because you've got your 3 touch points throughout the week. You've got your small group Bible study, you've got your large group gathering, you've got church, and maybe you also throw in a fourth if you're like getting discipled or something. But I think it's really easy to get carried along basically, and to have other people always sort of pushing you. And then when it comes to like yourself, there's like not always a need to push yourself. And so I think like that's one of the first areas that comes to mind is when like there's not like an innate drive to push for Jesus when others can sort of manufacture that for you.
Yeah, I think I would say pretty much the same. It's like trying to break out of the normal drive of things, the normal routine, to take a step back and look at yourself and look at how you want your relationship with God to grow. I think that's a hard first step to take. But and then a hard second step is to actually like go and change, to change the life that you're living, and to not always, like you're saying, Jason, not to just rely on other people, rely on church as like your weekly source of Christian intake, but to really make it a part of yourself and a part of your full life. And that is something that I definitely 100% struggle with also. It's so difficult, like to really break out of that. And it sounds like so easy to talk about, but when it comes to like actually doing it, there's so many things that I always come up with excuses to kind of prevent me from developing my relationship with God or just spending time with God, even though I know like from experience and like head knowledge that spending time with God is great and like has benefited me so much and given me so much peace and help in times of need. And yet it seems like it's so hard to come back to that. And I think that's like a struggle that I face, a struggle that a lot of Christians in America face.
Yeah, another way to say that I think is that it's like the comfort trap there is that it's so easy to be lukewarm. And from what I've heard of persecuted Christian nations, it's like it's pretty much impossible to be a lukewarm Christian there. Like you're in or you're out. And so I think that's definitely something that people in Western churches have to face that people in persecuted nations don't.
I think for me, like just realize it's like it's not even like a 180-degree turn or even like a 90-degree. It's just 1 degree turns that Satan uses to kind of slowly distract us from the path. I love Sprummer, our spring and summer conference that we have. It was through Zoom this year, but I think one of the sessions I went to, they're talking about how like this 1 degree turns about a lot of different things. Like when it comes to community and even finances, where the devil can take something that is good. It's like take something like tithing. And yet he can slowly start to nudge our hearts in different ways. You're like, maybe I won't tithe this week because I want to buy a car, or I want to buy a house, or I want to pay like my student loans. It's like just these little 1 degree turns that the devil can keep on using to distract us from really pursuing the Lord. And I think even Steve, like when you were thinking about it, like I think often like kind of church and even like going to like say like large group and that kind of stuff, like it's almost like convenience store gospel. Like we go in, grab something really quick and just leave. Sunday, go in, grab that 3-point message real quick, leave, feel good. Okay, yeah, like I did my good deed of the day. Like, I did my Christian acts. And yet I think I almost love summertime when it comes to college students, because that is a time where you come to face with, okay, I don't have a community anymore. In quarantine, like we're a virtual church. Like, I think even, I don't know if you guys saw that, but I think for UO Epic, at least we really like saw like, is people were like coming to Epic to actually like pursue their faith, or are they just coming because it's convenient, because they have friends there, because there's other Asians, and it's like we're in Oregon, so there aren't that many Asians, right? And so it's like a fun place to hang out with people. And so I think for us to really like summertime is an amazing time to really come back and just like really pursue your walk on your own. And I think too, even that, like I was actually really struggling with like comfort at the beginning of this quarantine. And one of my mentors and my friends, I forgot who it was, but like they were saying about there's that passage in the gospel where Jesus is talking about how like what father like doesn't give their like their children like something. I'm really paraphrasing. Like we won't give them like a snake or like a scorpion or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And yet and he was telling me, he was like, and what father doesn't want like their children to come to them either? So like asking for that desire to seek after the Lord. Like what like God our Father like, wants us to get like closer to him. So like he's gonna be like so happy, more than willing to answer the prayer of like, God, like would you put that passion and desire in me to like seek after you? And I know that prayer for me actually transformed my quarantine. From one that was like I was in that comfort zone. Like, you know, you're telling me like I was at the top of like the comfort where it was like it was my own comfort. And yet as God took me into those areas of like uncomfortableness, but also like his comfort, that I think I grew a lot.
I think also, you know, we talk about, oh yeah, it's the problem that people come to these events and kind of expect that to be their Christian contact point of the week. But you know, the way we've kind of set up the system, you know, lends itself to people end up being like that. You know, when we get together as like Christians, brothers and sisters, you know, we don't talk about God, you know, because we end up talking about, oh, what's going on throughout your week, what's like how classes, what's I don't know, the latest sports team results or something like that. But we haven't made it like a normal thing to talk about. Just be open and talk about how your relationship with God is going. What have you been reading? What have you been learning about God? Like, are you doing well? Like, how do you feel like God is speaking to you recently? You know, that it's we don't I don't know, we haven't normalized it because like it's awkward, or we don't want people to feel left out, or something or the other. But maybe that kind of culture that we've created lends itself to people thinking, okay, yeah, I come for this specific event, this is specific Christian event, the large group meetings, this is the small group meetings, the church or whatever, the worship jam sessions, you know, and that's what my Christianity is. Where when we keep on trying to say that, oh yeah, Christianity needs to be a part of your entire life, maybe we should make it a part of our entire lives. And when we meet together, like show within our Christian community that yeah, this is a part of our entire lives, and it's not just an event. It's like your life.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that stems from like uh, almost like worrying about the non-believer and like, oh, what are they gonna think? And um, yeah, I think like sometimes like the stronger believers will ask each other like, oh, how's your relationship with God? How can I be praying for you? And that's awesome. We love to see that. But in terms of like what you're saying about like, should we normalize that? Yes, I wish we could, but it is really hard because you know there are people at all different stages of their faith. Like I think it's unfortunate, but I think mature believers, they sort of like know what to say when that question is asked of them, like, how's your relationship with God? Like, you know, they know what to say, like, oh yeah, this and this. And I would hope that they would be honest, whether like they're doing well or not. But if you say, you know, to the 1-day-old Christian, like, how's your relationship with God? Like, I feel like it's just kind of a hard question for them to answer at that stage. And so you just sort of avoid the conversation.
Right, but
altogether.
is that like a, you know, we avoid that and then
yeah, I am also wondering if we should just start pushing that to normalize
Right,
it,
no?
even though it is uncomfortable. Like maybe we should, because I think also like I really like what you're saying. It's like when we put together this sort of consumption oriented Christian experience, like that's what the person comes to internalize, at least until they read their Bible and, you know, figure out exactly what the Bible says about comfort and discomfort. But yeah, it's this is like a long standing raging battle about like, do we make them comfortable at the beginning and then sort of explain to them what scripture has to say about discomfort, or do we just start like discomfort from the beginning so that they understand it as like an integral part of the Christian walk?
Yeah, I think like even Stephen, what you're saying, like maybe like it's become like at least for me, like I just describe sometimes like Epic can sometimes feel like a social club for Asians, and like maybe it's actually because we've kind of set it up like that. You know, I know at least for Epic, like we want to like make it a welcoming place for non-believers, for new people to come in. And yeah, I think like there's always like that struggle of like how do we make it like it's basically like the milk versus meat kind of conversations, you know? Like how do we have like those heavy hitting like conversations, big deep conversations, and yet how do we also make it a space like welcoming for like new believers to come into? And so I think that yeah, it's definitely like difficult. And like I think like not only like even like the way it's formed, but even like the heart of people that come in as well. It's like, is your heart coming in to pursue the Lord, or is your heart coming into like to just like meet other people, you know? And so I think definitely like at least like for me, I'm one of the student leaders at University of Oregon, and definitely like we're thinking about that at least for next year. Is like okay, so like how do we balance like this struggle? Because of course Matthew 28, go and make disciples of all nations, like yes, but I think it's definitely a difficult balance that is kind of hard to find.
Yeah, that seems like such a that kind of balance, or trying to find that balance there, is like something that we think about a lot. Like, do we want to provide? We've done so much as like American church to make church as comfortable as it can for people. You know, like as far as just the environment. You know, we don't we preachers don't preach things that are like a too scandalous, or whatever, you know, like too controversial, like because you don't want to scare away new believers that are first coming to the church. You know, you might have like snacks before and after service, you know, to get people to come for that or something. But is like to try to invite more people in. But I do wonder, like, is that leading to a culture of just church being comfortable? You know, I was reading I'm not sure if I mentioned it on the podcast or not yet, but I definitely told Jason. I was reading an article, amazing article, the other day, that was talking about the fastest growing church in the world. And do you know what country it's in? It's in Iran, which is like, to me, that's really surprising because I don't naturally like, I don't know, just the things I've been taught. I don't think of Iran as like a very Christian nation, but the fastest growing church in the world is in Iran. And one of the quotes from like one of the leaders is that like, oh, because the people here, when they become Christians, they are we make Christian disciples, not Christian converts. And like the that the Christians that want to follow God there, they're like all in, you know. We don't get like people that are just like, oh, they convert, you know, because they think the idea is nice, you know. It has to be a part of their life. And that's kind of what we're saying here when we compare the Western Christianity to, I don't know, Christianity in countries that they're more persecuted, is that those people like understand the risks that they have to go through to become a Christian, and they still say yes. Whereas in America, there are not really like too many risks, other than like depending on your social group, people might look at you differently. But maybe like the fact that we have tried to make it so comfortable has led to this culture of people who, you know, call themselves Christian, and but then when faced with the challenges might fall away. It's like the parable of the sower, right? The seeds fall on like rocky ground, and there's no like nourishment, and so the seeds don't sprout. And then the ones that get tangled up by the weeds because Satan comes and attacks, you know, it's there are a lot of people out there like that.
We also talked a lot about that in our incomplete gospel episode. But yeah, there's a whole like comfort and discomfort side of church, and the way that like the American church preaches like sin and wrath versus prosperity gospel. And yeah, it's just it's hard when there's so much variation, what we want to learn, what we talk about even. Yeah, I think it's it's so hard to like, when you're leading someone else, try and determine like what the appropriate amount of discomfort to like sort of give to them is. And I think that's like another really hard part of it. And I think like a lot of that, when we talk about like discomfort, maybe even pursuing discomfort, like Stephen, we've talked about like in our boldness episode, like when you don't want to do something, but you feel called to do it. And so you just make yourself uncomfortable to, you know, please God and what you feel like he's calling you to do. I feel like a lot of that discomfort sort of has to be self-generated. And that's something that's also really hard, just to make that switch when we're used to being comfortable, is to like suddenly say like, I'm going to try and change that. It's just really hard.
Yeah. And I think like It's crazy. It's like in the Western church, like how much do we hear the phrase like take up your cross and like die to yourself? You know, like I don't think like whenever people think of Christians, like that's the first thing, or even like people in their own personal walk, like is that the first thing they think of? I think a lot of times like we can just come, I guess, to God for like selfish reasons, if that makes sense. You know, it's like, oh, like I want to go to heaven, or like, oh, like I want to like live forever, or like, oh, I want my sins clean. And yet, I think like, and of course, like that's the process of sanctification as well. It's like sometimes turning our internal like selfish motives of coming to Christ and changing them to be more Christ-centered. But I think a lot of the times, I think maybe why it's like comfort-based like Christianity is because we've made so much of the faith like about ourselves. I had like a really good discussion with my discipler once about like worshiping when you don't feel like it. You know, because like we've made worship so much about ourselves and how we feel that we forget like what the original intent was, and that was to like glorify God. And I think I gave it another thing Stephen was mentioning too is like basically like beautifying the gospel, like making the gospel like marketable. Basically, like how do we make this so it can reach as many people as possible? And I don't know if we're like shout out books, but like if you guys haven't read Letters to the Church by Francis Chan, like this is actually the book that kind of like got me thinking about like this idea of comfort in the Western church, because I think it's just so easy sometimes to want to market the gospel, want to make it into a nice complete package, so that even friends like when we have conversations about like the LGBTQ community, you know, or abortion, like we package it in a nice way so like it seems nice to them, you know. And yet, like just like we're talking about like the incomplete gospel, so like there's much more than it was like God being love. Like there is his justice, there is like, you know, like all these other things. And yet sometimes we try to make Christian, like Western Christianity so comfortable that we just like only give them the parts that I think we want them to hear.
I think one thing that would kind of help this problem, or I know there, like I want to kind of break out of this a comfort zone and find the ways where I can like push my faith, and I find it sometimes where I find it sometimes hard to do is finding people to help disciple me that are not within my age range. Finding people to help me out that are older than me, that are have more experience and can kind of encourage me in that way. A lot of times in college ministry, we spend so much time with people our same age, and it feels like the what is it? The discipler to discipled year gap is less than like 2 years, you know, less than 3 years, and like at that point, I mean, we've gone through I don't know 2 or 3 more years of school, but like as far as life experience, you know, we don't have that much over other people, and it would be nice if we are able to have this the church and discipleship that span like all ages, so that those who are like 10 years 20 years like with more experience and with more wisdom hopefully would be able to disciple people like us, and you know, for us also like to help out kids like middle school, elementary school kids age. Maybe that's something that would be I think I would find that very helpful. And yeah, it's hard to see the full range because we're very focused in college ministry. So that's why it's important to, after your college ministry, to be involved in like a church, to be involved in a local church where you can befriend and get to know people of all the ages and help out that way.
Yeah, you got to pay it forward. I was discipled all this year, and it was super helpful. I went through a lot of discomfort scheduling wise, trying to make sure that ministry occupied as much time as I need to in my schedule while still doing like 20-25 hours of work a week and then like a full school load. And so it's like it not only like helped me through the discomfort just to have like a person, but like learning and have like gaining perspective on that discomfort, I think was really helpful for me as well. But yeah, I think we're running a little bit late on time here. So just to give like one last, I guess, thought to apply for the viewers, how would you guys say that we should, I guess, be looking at discomfort and comfort as we move forward, and what we're supposed to do with that in our lives, like given all the things that we talked about in this podcast?
I think for me, like when I was in those really comfortable areas of my life, I decided like prayer, scary prayer. Like even like last spring, what happened and the reason why it was so hard was because I was like, God, my life is too good. Would you make my life difficult? And let me tell you, God is gonna answer that. And he answered it like crazy. Like two of the hardest seasons of my life came because I asked God, I was like, God, like give me a challenge. And he was like, bet, okay. But I think like not even kidding, those seasons, as much as the toughest they were, like I grew the most like I ever done in my life. And like I'm not saying like for you guys like out there, it's like the listeners to be like, okay, bet, like right after this, I'm gonna pray this prayer. Like you like if you want to pray this prayer, like please be like expect like God to fully
Dude,
move
I
because
feel
he
like
will
anytime
do
I
things.
hear someone say that, like, oh yeah, they pray for like this discomfort, you know, God just wham.
No, God is gonna rock your world. And yeah, I feel like sometimes for me that's what it took because I felt like I was so stuck in this cycle of comfort. I was like, okay, cool. I was doing all the right things basically. You know, I was going to church. You know, I was doing like small groups. I was leading small groups. I was like doing all these things, and yet I felt stuck in this cycle. And so I was like, I think one of the things I did was just like, God, like, would you come in? Would you make me uncomfortable? And I think like even more than that though, if you don't want to pray, that's scary of a prayer. But even like as I was saying like earlier, just like God, like, would you give me that passion, desire to seek after you? And I think like once we start centering that comfort around Him instead of around ourselves, or even centering that discomfort around Him rather than ourselves, I think that is where God is able to just truly be able to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're good. You just
agree
chilling.
with that. Yeah. What do you think, Jason?
Oh yeah, I think a lot. The more I thought about it, is like maybe focusing on comfort and discomfort, like in itself as sort of an end, is not the right thing. It's hard for me to tell people have these sorts of battles. Like, am I too comfortable? Am I uncomfortable enough? Like those sorts of things are put into place the more that you like read your Bible and pray and pursue Jesus. I think the same, we've also said this to be true about sin. If you have sin in your life, that also gets put in its proper place by pursuing Jesus. So yeah, ditto to everything that Nobuki said. And also I think as long as you're pursuing God and trying to find his will for you, I think he will make it clear, or else he'll just do it to you, like how comfortable or uncomfortable you're supposed to be. And then I think the onus is sort of on you, how you're going to respond to that comfort and discomfort when those things happen.
Yep. I agree with that one too.
Thanks, Steven. You're the best.
Wow.
It's been great having you on, Nobuki. We're coming up kind of on an hour now. So is there any final thoughts that you have, or Jason, that you have about just this comfort, discomfort?
I think so.
We went all over the place. We went all over the world, the self, the church.
Yeah.
Not always in the most organized fashion, but yeah. I hope that was good for the viewers.
I think it'd be good to just encourage you as the viewer, like that you're not walking this alone. Like you don't have to face all this discomfort, and when the trials get hard and it's hard to follow God, and you just want to like kind of live your own your normal life, that like press into God, because God really wants to be there and like help you through that. And that's something that I'm trying to learn and make real for myself too, because I know it's true. I know that God is able to like help me through those times where I'm struggling. And I would encourage the viewer too, that press into God, because God's going to be there, and God's going to wants you to come out of this and to be new and to be changed and to be molded into an even better person. So keep on persevering. It's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it in the end. Thank you so much for watching the podcast, for listening. If you have anything interesting that you'd like to respond, or you have an interesting perspective on this discomfort that we've talked about, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you would like to guest on the podcast, fill out that form below. Nobuki filled out the form, and as you can see, he's here. And we had a great discussion today, so we'd love for you to come and talk about something that that God is speaking to you about. So if you fill out that form in the description, we'll be happy to get back to you and see what it is that you'd like to talk about. Other than that, this has been the 10 Chapters Apart podcast. We will see you again next week, Mondays at noon. Thanks so much for watching.